Welcome to Love and Trauma, the real deal. I'm Danielle Sebastian, best-selling author, coach, and yes, I've been through the marriage trenches myself. This show is all about how to actually deal with trauma in relationships and make it work without losing your mind. If you're ready for honest talk, no fluff, and tools that cut through the noise, tune in, because let's face it, love can be a bit of a mess, but it's a mess worth figuring out. This is Love and Trauma, the real deal.
If you've ever wondered whether trauma, yours or a loved one's, is the missing piece keeping you from more peace, joy, and less conflict, this episode is for you. Last week, I was able to be at the launch of the 4th edition of the Women Thrive book, inspiring true stories of women overcoming adversity. And my guest today is Heather Hansen. And she, for the first time ever, has revealed in her chapter of that book the real reason behind her chronic health symptoms. So Heather is a best-selling author, speaker, and wellness expert with over 25 years in healthcare. She's been helping women break free from bloating, fatigue, brain fog, and stubborn weight gain. But behind her expertise is a deeply personal battle, and one that she has never fully shared until now. So in this episode with Heather, we are going to get into the startling connection between trauma and chronic health issues. She's also going to talk about her go-to tools for regulating herself after being triggered. And she's going to talk very deeply about how she finally broke through her resistance to sharing her past and what it really took to heal. And for partners who have ever wondered, why does my spouse act this way? Always needing control, never taking a break, chasing perfection, and withdrawing completely, this episode is a must listen. The patterns that frustrate and confuse you today likely started long before you ever met, and Heather helps break it all down for us. So Heather's own journey with autoimmune thyroid disease led her to question everything she had been told by conventional medicine. She refused to accept that her symptoms were just something she had to live with, and instead she went on a mission to uncover the root causes of chronic health struggles. And here's what I love the most about Heather and my interview with her is that her work isn't just about health. It's about connection, hope, and as all of you who have been with me want to have a plan. She is all about having a plan. She believes that true healing happens when people feel heard and supported. So if you're ready to understand the hidden link between trauma and health better, or if you're a partner who's trying to understand your spouse's behavior, this is an episode that you don't want to miss. So let's just jump right into my interview. Much for joining me today. I am so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. It was so good to meet you in person just a few days ago.
Heather and I were in Miami last week. We had a Women's Thrive retreat, and they also had their book launch where Heather has a chapter in this book, which is absolutely amazing. It's a collection of really women's stories and challenges and how they've overcame them. And Heather, your chapter was amazing. How are you feeling after the book launch?
You know, the book launch itself was pretty amazing. I didn't know what to expect, and it was amazing and wonderful, and I felt very calm and confident. And it was very interesting because yesterday I started having a little bit of nerves about what was coming out in the chapter and who was going to be reading it and what they were thinking. So I started overthinking it a bit. Today I feel very balanced about it again. But it's been just a wave of emotions.
Yeah, because what I can tell is that, you've been able to use your story to help other women. But it looks like your story was about your health issues.
Yes.
And so that's kind of been the story that's been out there. But is this chapter one of the first sort of places that you talked about the story behind the chronic diseases?
This is absolutely the first time that I've ever talked about the underlying root cause publicly. um, my and it was because my childhood caused a lot of shame for me, and I carried a lot of shame and guilt around deep inside. Although, as I lived my life, people never knew what had gone on, right? Because I just kept shoving everything down, and I showed up as who I wanted to show up as. But I also showed up as an overachiever. What I learned to be a codependent on doing everything and anything to help others feel good and balanced and well. And I was really doing it so I felt good about myself, but I thought I was doing it for everybody else because I didn't want them to have problems and struggle.
And do you think so? You were very successful despite
Mm-hmm.
the childhood and all those things. But do you feel like people just weren't recognizing some of the signs as well?
People didn't recognize the signs at all. And, friends didn't know because they didn't tell them. And it was very interesting as every time a little tiny piece would come out, and I would say probably in my 40s, I might have started talking about something that happened here, something that happened there. And I was surprised at how taken aback my friends were when I would mention just a little tiny bit. They would, oh my God, how are you okay? I mean, how are you living your life and showing up the way that you're showing up when that happened? And I thought, what are you talking about? Because I had minimized all the things that happened to me as I was going through life. And so I was going to show up as the person that I wanted to. And I was always trying to prove myself to myself and to others that I could be somebody. And if somebody told me, "Oh, you'll never be able to do that," I was certain that I was going to do it. It just became a desire and it was going to happen. And so it was really interesting on how I spent so long trying to run away from what I just wrote about. I mean, my whole life, my whole adult life, I was just going this direction, trying to get away from it. And now here it is, I'm presenting it in this book.
Did you feel as when you're a kid and you don't know any different, did you just default to this is how other people live as well? Or how did you feel like that about your childhood?
So, I remember vividly very young times in my life, 2 to 3 years old. And I know a lot of it, when you look at research, that children aren't supposed to remember, but I think the trauma around it and the way that it wrapped my brain, it was just something that I was hiding. I was putting walls up all around, and I was there, but I was trying not to feel all the feelings that were happening around it. But as the older that I got, the more walls I put up, but the more symptoms I had as a child. I started having all these rashes and just illnesses that no one could explain. And then by 13, I had a big thyroid goiter that my doctor had no idea what was going on. He just told me I was overweight and needed to lose weight. That was my problem. And so it was just, I had all of these health problems that were creeping up that couldn't be explained, but yet I didn't tell anybody because I was so afraid of what might happen to me if I told what was going on. And I was 16 years old before it snapped. I was laying on my bedroom floor. I remember this. I was laying on my bedroom floor. I was looking at the ceiling, and all of a sudden, it all came on me that this wasn't right. What was happening to you and is happening to you is not right and not normal. What are you going to do about it? And so it took me that long into my teenage years to really realize what was going on was not normal. It shouldn't be happening. So it surprisingly took that long to realize. those things were wrong.
I think that's a lot of the problem with you. People are often asking, like, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you disclose sooner? All those type of things come out. And I think that's definitely part of it, right? When you're a kid, you don't know any different until something happens where all of a sudden you realize, I don't think other people live like this.
Mm-hmm. And I was an adult, even taking this into my career as adult, even in nursing, I realized there were so many triggers that I would just freeze, right? That walking on eggshells, you didn't know how you were supposed to show up that day until the other person came home and you could figure out what kind of a mood they were in. And then you could either calm down and relax and go about the day, or it's just amped up inside, right? And scared. So it is very scary that so many people go through this, more people than should have ever gone through this, but people don't talk about it.
Did you know when you were, like you said, in college, that those were coping mechanisms that you used to survive your childhood that were coming out in adulthood?
I had no idea. No.
Yes. It's so sad to me.
Mhm.
And that is part of the reason that I'm doing this show, is because I don't think that trauma survivors or their families or partners realize that a lot of the behaviors that are being seen were very protective
Mhm.
at one point in your life.
And what I've noticed by talking to others that have gone through similar things is we develop coping mechanisms. And my
Yeah.
coping mechanism was control. I needed to try to control my environment behind the scenes so that if I did this, then maybe I could calm the beast at home, right? So then I could be calm. But that type of control actually turned into an eating disorder that I carried from teenage years on into, I would say I probably still have some aspect of it in my brain, even though it's so much better. But that was my control. I couldn't control anything else, but I could control what I was eating. So when someone told me I was overweight and that was my problem, I stopped eating, things got a little bit better. And some people recognize that. And then it became very addicting to stay there. So I would go days without eating. And then I would go and binge on a bunch of food. And then I would feel bad again. And it went into this roller coaster for years of my life. And I used that. It was my way of controlling things.
Even your need, your need for success, like you're never going to give up, right? If somebody tells you that you can't do it, even those type of behaviors, that's because of your childhood, right? I mean, you were a survivor.
Yeah.
You made it, you left it, all those things. But then did that ultimately end up affecting your relationships and health?
So it did, right? And it just goes to show when things are wrong and when you've stuck down so many emotions and and I was taught that really is you don't show emotions. The only emotion I knew growing up from my parents was anger. And, I watched my mom be afraid of my dad too. So, she was in her own situation and I'm watching all this, right? So those are the emotions that I saw, but the message was put your big girl pants on and keep going, right? You don't stop. You don't miss days of school if you're sick. You just keep going. You must work hard. You have to do these things. And so in my mind, that was all you did, right? You picked your big girl pants up and you move on and move forward. The problem is I didn't trust anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't trust anyone. I was going to do it all myself. And no one's going to help me. I'm going to do it on my own. I don't need you. But the walls that I put up around my relationships of not letting people get close to me, and that was a hindrance. And I'm still working on that today of letting my husband take care of me in certain aspects because I still want to do it myself. And I don't need to do it myself. I just don't. And so it's still this whole process has been almost like peeling an onion, right? You're taking some layers off and then you're dealing with those layers and then you peel a few more layers. And when you're ready, then the layers that you hadn't dealt with for so many years start to bubble up, and then you can deal with them slowly.
And it's so hard for partners too, who are like, they know you want it, right? They know you want connection. And there's just this barrier there. Oh, it's really, gosh, painful. It's painful and sad. How did you end up kind of breaking down those barriers?
You know, I will tell you, it was a process in breaking
Yep.
down the barriers. And honestly, breaking down the barriers really happened most recently, the last couple of years. It's just because of just pushing things down and keeping going. The more life you live, the more stuff that's going on in the environment. You for so years that in so many different ways. We're coming back. Those symptoms were coming back. And I was like, oh, no, this is not going to happen. But it set me into this whole process of really working on beliefs that I had developed around myself of not good enough, not being pretty enough, not worthy, the long list of not enoughs, right? I had to work on that. I had to work on things like breath work and getting some of these old emotions out, and energy work to get the old emotions out. And I had to peel those layers of the onion. And then I listened to this podcast that was talking about couples and relationships. And the best advice that I've ever had was in that podcast. And it was simply show up as the person that you would want to be in a relationship with.
Very simple. Very simple, but so profound, right?
And I realized how much I push people away of, oh, no, I'm going to handle this myself. You go over there. And I started not doing a lot of the things that were very nice, the caring things that I was doing. I had just stopped doing those. And I realized I'm not even being myself. I want to be that person. I want to show up as that person. Stop being so stubborn, bring down the walls a little bit, and show up as the person that you want to be connected with. And that made a big dynamic difference for relationships.
I'm glad you said that, because I do think that I've experienced it in my relationship, and then I've also seen it, in some of my clients, where it's like things were going well for a while, right? The relationship was going well, and then all of a sudden, it seems like some of that past comes forward, and then our partners are really struggling. And like you said, it can be life experiences. You could have had some sort of experience that reminded you, of your childhood. You could be having a child the same age, or a child who all of a sudden gets their driver's license, right? And that brings up these emotions. And it's okay when you have the tools on how to get back, realize that you're not a kid anymore, that this isn't going to be the same as it was in the past. And it's a process, as you said. And it's okay that you think you have everything figured out, and then you run into some roadblocks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And they come up, right? And all the tools that I've picked up over the course of my lifetime, because I've been working on this for a long time, but I would do things and I'd find balance, right? And I'd do things and I'd find balance.
Yeah.
And, finally working on some of the deep rooted things, the tools that I have now are so much more useful. And I remember when my youngest son got married and my parents were coming to stay at my house, and my oldest granddaughter lived here at the time. And I had so much anxiety around them coming to my house and being in the same house with my granddaughter. It's like, oh my gosh, this is still really going on, Heather. And, any time that they were around her, I was like making sure I was watching her. And those emotions are still deep down, right? But now I know what to do with them, right? Now, this past summer, I had gone back to Pennsylvania to my grandma's birthday party. She's turning 90. And it was the first time ever that I showed up and with my parents, and I didn't feel anxious.
Can you talk about some of the tools that you have, the most helpful tools for you, maybe just in the moment and you start to feel those emotions? Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another.
Welcome to Love and Trauma.
Banging your head against the wall, trying to navigate the complexities of a relationship impacted by childhood trauma, it doesn't have to be this daunting. When you're married to a partner with unresolved childhood trauma, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will set them off. No matter what you try, it feels like there's always something triggering another emotional response that seems completely out of context. And the harder you try to fix it, the more discouraged you feel. So what's the issue here? Navigating marriage with a trauma survivor is different. The love languages don't work. Date nights don't work. Self-help books don't help. But here's the good news. I've created something that does work. Something built from years of hard-earned lessons and real-life experience. Ready to take the first step toward real change? Let's talk. I'm offering a free one-on-one call where we'll dive into what's going on in your relationship and figure out a way forward together. This isn't just another quick chat. It's a chance to finally be heard, to share what you're going through with someone who truly gets it. No judgment, just real support. So if you're ready to start making sense of it all and find a little more peace in your marriage, book your free call now. Your happiness, your peace, and your relationship are worth it. Let's do it together.
Biggest tool is, right, because our brains can tell us anything, right? And I learned that as small children, by the time we're 5, how we perceive our environment is how we determine the world is and how life is. So we create these things about us, these truths that at the time we think it's true, but they were never true. Instead, it's the exact opposite almost. And so I learned this methodology where if you start feeling anxious, nervous, sad, angry, you need to stop and think about what you're even thinking about in that moment. And realizing, what am I believing? You know, this situation is going on and now I'm all upset about it. But knowing that if my body's reacting that way, whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm believing is not quite true, that something else must be more true instead. And just looking at things that way of knowing, oh, I'm feeling this way, so whatever I'm thinking is not true. Sometimes I can just table it and say, you know, whatever you're thinking is not true, keep going. Other times I might need to sit down and rewind it, right? And so when I showed up there in Pennsylvania, I knew what to expect. I knew my mom, I know what she does. I wasn't going to expect her to do anything else. And that was okay because I had no expectations of anything else going on. And it was okay that she's that way because that's her. And once I started thinking that way and using those tools, everything else just falls into place, right? You can handle any situation.
And I think it's important for partners to know this, that this reflection needs to occur, right? And it's not immediate. It's not, I'm sure, it isn't for my partner, where it's not like you have the emotion and you can do this in 3 minutes.
Right.
And then be fine, right? You need a break. But it was hard as a partner when my husband would withdraw. It was withdraw. And sometimes, you know, a really long time withdraw. and it was really hard not to take personally. But it was when I realized that this was his way of regulating, and I was able to remove myself from that withdrawal. It wasn't about me.
Mm.
That that we were both able to work on it together, and then he's now, you know, way more able to do it more successfully and communicate with me that, hey, no, I just need a little break. You know, I'm feeling my things.
Mm-hmm.
And so now our relationship is so much better because I was able to understand it and then give him the peace to do so without nagging, getting in his face. Why are you doing this? Why are you acting like this? Why are you shutting me out? All those things didn't work.
They didn't, right? Because if you meet those two energies together, right? So if you have this anxious, nervous energy over here and you're meeting it with an anxious, nervous energy, it's just going to do the exact opposite of what you want. But if you approach with curiosity of, hey, babe, what's going on today? Do you need some space? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do to help? And if they say, you know what, no, I just need some time, just give them time to go and do that, right? It was hard for me to admit, though, that I needed those things, right? Because I had it all together. You know, nothing bothers me. I'm the one that stays like this. It felt like defeat to me to have to admit that at first. And now I know it's not defeat. It's just how your body works, right? And because I work with the physiology of the body, right? And how the brain affects what the body's doing, I realized you need to actually apply the tools that you're teaching your clients to yourself, Missy, right? Because sometimes we can know so much.
Yes.
And then we forget to apply it to our own selves.
No, my husband would have rather, you know, I don't know, get a root canal than tell me that he needed a break,
Yes.
that he was processing his emotions. I mean, it was so hard. There, you guys, you have the shame so deep, that, you know, that is so hard for you. But once you realize you have, you know, you can do it. It's okay. You didn't cause it, right?
Right.
It releases the shame when you name it, and then hopefully everybody can have somebody on the other side who understands it.
Yes.
And can sit with that and be okay with those breaks.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wish for everyone.
Yes.
But I think it's such a big thing how the physical effects of childhood trauma. I think it's an unmet need. And as you mentioned, it's a huge sign. We talk about the mental health, you know, side effects, the depression, the anxiety, all that. But the way that the body reacts when you're suppressing those things is something that I want to talk to you about. So when you had those things that were coming out in childhood, did any of your doctors, even into adolescence, correlate your home life with those outward effects?
Not once was I ever asked about anything. I was more labeled a mystery of, we don't know what's going on with you. I have no idea. And, you know, I did grow up in a small town, and the doctor that I went to, he had a house as an office, right? And he had this cabinet full of pills and bottles, and he would be like, I don't know, let's try this. And he would go to his cabinet and he'd open it, and in this little manila envelope, he would, here you go, try these, see if this works. And so I was never asked. And then when I was 19, 20, I was having a lot of symptoms come roaring back because because I never dealt with the emotions. Even though I left where I was, I still had a lot of symptoms because I had a lot of hatred for myself that I was harboring, that, you know, I was never going to be good enough and show up enough. And I just was so busy trying to be more. I wasn't paying attention to any of the things that I'd done. And the symptoms just kept getting worse. I'd have headaches all the time. I would get bloated. My menstrual cycles were so heavy that it was almost unbearable. My emotions and my rage. And at that time, I had a fear. It's like, oh my God, are you turning into your dad? is this genetic? Is this anger genetic? And I would have all these racing thoughts through my head. And at the time, I would go to the military base, which people went to the military base at the hospital sometimes several times a week, right? Because there was all these things that were going on with me. But I can tell you right now, I never told anyone that I was starving myself for days, never, nor did anyone ask. And at times I got down to 90, 95 pounds, and no one asked me, are you okay? In those initial years. No one asked me, hey, is something going on? Do you think maybe you need to talk to somebody? Not once. You know, it's just one doctor to another of, I don't know, I can't explain this, go over here. I can't explain this, go over here. And I desperately wanted someone to tell me how to fix the problem. And I kept telling my doctors, multiple of them, can you tell me how to fix this? I get it. I have, I was labeled autoimmune thyroid. I have autoimmunity. I was told I was just going to have to live with the symptoms. And it didn't make sense to me that I was so young and I was just going to have to live like that. And so it just was one doctor after another after another. And I was never through this whole course asked if everything was okay until I ended up having a hysterectomy that I didn't know I was going to have. I thought I was just going to have a dermoid tumor removed. And I woke up with a full hysterectomy. And that surgeon, when I went back to him, he asked me, are you okay? You're losing too much weight. What's going on? But I didn't tell him.
No, but that's not the point, I don't think. Right?
Right.
I mean,
Right.
anybody who knows about trauma, should know that it's about repeatedly gaining that trust.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or you have to have that trust before anybody's gonna
Yes.
come out and say yes. But it's about addressing those things and getting them, the potential help when you suspect.
Right. It was. But, I was still a hindrance to that doctor actually helping me. If I would have told him, he would have gotten me the help. But I was still bound and determined, you don't tell anybody, you fix it yourself. And so I still kept being my own roadblock into that. And, it was pretty interesting. And then the chapter I wrote is as I went on my healing journey that I was going to fix this because there was a way and I knew it. Writing a letter to my parents 17, 18 years ago. And I wrote it out. I hand wrote it and I put it in the mail and I mailed it to them. I have no idea if they read it. I'm certain my dad never read it, but if my mom got it, she may or may not have read it. That looking back was such a huge piece to my healing. And I had no idea at the time. But because my autoimmunity, the symptoms got less and less and less and less. I just thought it was what I was eating. Like, oh, you changed your food and you're doing it this way. But then after I learned, oh, wow, this is a major process, I really dumped a lot of emotions out in that letter. And I sent it. So I wasn't keeping all those things inside anymore.
And that was such a release.
Mm-hmm. It was. I had no idea, but now I do know.
The gynecological effects of childhood trauma is really interesting to me because I think that that's, very women specific thing, but I feel like we could do a better job. So what are the statistics of childhood trauma having terrible menstrual cycles and endometriosis? And
when I looked it up, the research that they had done is 75% of women who had childhood sexual trauma had issues with their period and their hormones in some way. And when I read The Body Keeps a Score, and that has tons of science in it. And it's almost hard to read because it's so science-based, which is a good thing, but then it doesn't flow. It takes a while to read it. But it made so much sense to me when I read that book of all those emotions and all that trauma. Like I was keeping it all in my core, all my digestive symptoms that I was having, and I had a lot. And I went to a lot of gastroenterologists that couldn't help me fix my problem. And all of the female hormones, I had a hysterectomy when I was 25 years old. And looking back, I was like, oh my God, I was such a baby at 25 years old. But it was all of that was built up for so many years, and it affected those organs Just like in the book, there's a part that I mentioned that witnessing my mother and something that happened to my mother around her neck connected that to my thyroid goiter in an image of I saw it when I was doing some energy release work. And it made me speechless. I could not talk. There was water flowing out of my eyes like you wouldn't believe. And the connection between those two things of witnessing something when I was 2 or 3 to my thyroid goiter, I was like, oh my God, if that doesn't tie it together, my unconscious mind had been holding on to that for so long.
A lot of people don't see those signs.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that we could identify those more. And as you said, it's not easy to break it until you're ready. But I do think the more that we can, first of all, understand and educate to the fact that you can have health effects, very significant health effects, because of all that bottled up and the stress that you're carrying all the time, being so hyper alert to everything around you. It has these effects, and it's okay. It's not your fault, and remove the shame of those. I hope that more people can seek help.
Mm-hmm. That's the biggest thing of what happened to people as children. It's never their fault. They were never to blame. But looking and hearing from so many people of how much they carried through life, it's pretty amazing how many of my clients had eating disorders or still have eating disorders, or they're always reaching for the next thing to try to improve themselves, but they're not really digging into the deep, painful part because it's not pleasant to go through it. It feels awful going through it. It feels like you're falling to pieces. And most people are going to fall to pieces when they're going through just resolving some of these stored emotions that they've had in their body and how it's affected them. The nice thing about some of the things that I do is you don't have to do talk therapy for 10 years to get to the root, right? There's things like breath work that you can do and mindset work and energy work that you can do that help unwind the trauma so that you can get through that part quickly. And it doesn't feel good. And it's not supposed to. It's supposed to feel awful. But the only way to come into being a new version of yourself, a more free version of yourself, is to fall to pieces, going through the pain, and then putting yourself back together again as a new you, the you were supposed to be, and none of the crap happened to you growing up.
One of the people I interviewed, I was talking about that because I experienced it firsthand with my husband, how painful that was for him to go back and bring up all those things. Physically ill, physically sick. But ultimately, it was, the hope that it would be better was stronger because of the pain that he was in.
It was absolutely worth it. And what was happening, and now I can realize that now, is I was being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed very uncomfortably into working on it, right? Symptoms were coming. I was being pushed. I didn't really want to go. It was almost like I'm like, no, we're not doing this. I was so resistant to having to do the work. I didn't want to do the work. I'd spent my entire adult life avoiding doing the work. I never went to therapy. I didn't go see a counselor, nothing. The problem that was happening was God was pushing me and pushing me and pushing me and making me incredibly uncomfortable. Symptoms that hadn't been here for a really long time were coming back. Life kept feeling harder and harder and harder. And it was almost that I was being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed into actually working on the real thing that I needed to where it was uncomfortable. And I didn't want to because I was almost trying to put the brakes on, like, no, 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 I'm not going. I'm not doing this because I wanted everything. I wanted to be in control of everything. Going through the process and finally surrendering to the process of working on the hard stuff is where I actually found the most control and the most freedom. And after I was pushed and pushed and pushed, and when I finally surrendered, it was like I was being pulled through the process to where it felt like exactly where I needed to be and exactly what I needed to be doing.
So all the things that you were trying to control were just band-aids when you realized that you could control your emotions over it.
Mhm. Absolutely. And one of the things that I learned is I was never in control of any of that stuff. Thought I was controlling anyway. I was completely out of control. And the things that made the most impact in my life were the things that I had no control over and were the hardest things that I went through. And it's just very interesting on how we can create this thing in our brain of, no, we have to do it this way. It must be this way. And it doesn't make us feel very good. And then once we actually look at our thinking, it's completely opposite of what we actually need to be doing anyway.
I'm so glad you said that because that is what I think people need to hear is that, those coping mechanisms, they're not bad. They were literally, they helped you. They
Mhm.
were what got you through your childhood. It's just that they get to the extreme essentially, right? As adults to where then they're not as helpful. But it can be fixed. It can totally be fixed. It can totally be helped. It's not easy.
It is not easy. And oftentimes, that perfectionism mentality comes in with that control piece. And you're actually trying to achieve something that's not achievable. And doesn't exist. It does not. There is no way to have perfect. And I don't even know if we can define perfect, but we spend so much of our lives chasing it to realize there was nothing to chase. There was nowhere to go. There was no end.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. I know that all the work that you've done has helped people along the way, but uncovering this piece of the onion, I think, is something that people really need to hear, and I'm really proud of you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. It was not the easiest thing to share and show up this way, but I know, just going through this whole process, I've always known I was put on this earth to help people, and very deeply. And I did that through my whole career. This is different though. The way that being honest and open with somebody allows them to know it's okay for them to work through the process as well. Because it's fearful at first.
Well, thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you. I
And
appreciate
I want people to get the book because, your chapter was amazing and every other person had amazing stories. It's very uplifting and hopeful, and also just that we can get out of where we were, make
Yes.
things good and help others, and that's what you're doing, so thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I cannot thank Heather enough for sharing today, but for all of you, this show is about the real deal, and the real deal is this: if you are resisting, if you are in a place where you are chronically ill, if your relationships are suffering and at rock bottom, can you hear me now? Can you hear me, Joel? Can you hear me, Joel? Can you hear me, Joel? How about now? Can you hear me at all? Hopefully you can all hear me, but I want to thank everyone for listening today, and I can't thank Heather enough for telling her story. And this show is all about the real deal. So here's the real deal, people. If you are resisting, like Heather was, if you are chronically ill, if your relationships are suffering, I want you to take this as a wake-up call that it is time for you to reach out to someone. I think you heard Heather say many times that she kept thinking to herself, I can fix this. I can fix this alone. And you've been taught to do that because of your childhood. But in most cases, it's okay to ask for help. And there are people who can do that. The second thing that I want you to really understand is that the shame that you feel over the coping mechanisms that you use to survive your childhood that have maybe gone to the extreme and are affecting your adult relationships, it's okay. And I want you to know that they can be fixed. And I want partners of loved ones to know that by us understanding those things better, that we can be a supportive force for our partners. And the second thing, and the third thing that I want everyone to know is that it's not too late. If you're thinking it is too late for me, I am way too far along in my life for me to make these changes, I want you to know that it's not. It is never too late. And I want you to check out other episodes of my show if you are looking for opportunities and things that you can do that don't include talk therapy, because there's a lot of things that you can start today to make things better. All right. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you next time.
All right, that's a wrap for today on Love and Trauma, the real deal. Big thanks to my guests for sharing their insights. Couldn't have done it without you. Now, for those of you looking to take this journey further, I've got something special. Head to my website to grab Real Tactics, Real Healing, a survivor's playbook for navigating a relationship with a trauma survivor. It's packed with everything you need to know, do, and say to navigate the emotional minefield, find your balance, and regain your self-worth and happiness.